there, and welcome to another episode of Asperger Answers here at Asperger Experts. I'm Heather, and with me is Frank.
Hello.
And Caroline Goodell of Body Mind Basics. Caroline allows people to connect with their body through times of great stress and disconnection, and she does some amazing work with people. I'm really kind of not on that. We're going to talk about that more in a minute. So, welcome. Once a week, we take some questions from our AE Plus group, and we kind of take a deeper dive. As Danny says, this is how it works. And as we're going into these questions, we're also going to take comments from people on our Facebook page. We like to see where people are from. Oh my gosh, people are already commenting. Hello, from Central Ohio, Louisiana, Oregon, New Hampshire,
Alabama.
Way over there, Alabama, Oklahoma. Hi, y'all. Going through this with my 11-year-old son. Yeah, me and my 12-year-old son, too. So welcome, everyone. We like to see where you're from. We like to say hi.
Hello from the UK.
Hello from the UK. We really appreciate y'all tuning in. Asperger Experts has AE Plus, which is a subscription service that you can join for $1 at aspergerexperts.com/1. And that has access to a Minecraft server. It has access to discounts on our other products, access directly to some products like our books, and the parent support Facebook group, which is an amazing community of very supportive people. You can really check on just about any time. As you can see, there's people here from Norway, Baltimore, Connecticut. There are people from all over. And when you need support, it's an amazing place just to check in. And people are really usually willing to kind of step up and lend some insight and just connection, so you feel like you're not quite so alone.
And don't forget, we also have you can call in and talk to our coaches about
QA. Thank you. We got a once a week Q&A call too with one of our coaches, and that's where you can bring specific issues and get some real time interaction with and support. So that's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's all part of the A Plus membership.
Yeah. So with that, I think we're going to jump right into our first question by Susanna. Seeking comments and observations. Hi all. Since I joined this group 36 hours ago, I've felt truly understood by other parents, which has become increasingly rare as my 14-year-old progresses through the teenage years. I'm stunned by how many little things are not A-specific, but actually ASD traits. Homework is the biggest surprise. My son is usually perfectly capable of grasping whatever he's learning about and self-identifies as a brainiac. But, his total shutdown over homework has always flummoxed me. I remember him tunneling under his mattress as a 10-year-old in utter despair over an assignment that would have taken an hour at most. Now I'm reading on this group that many ASD kids have a no homework accommodation. We also have homework modifications for certain classes on his 504, which has helped not as much as I hoped, but some. My question is, what is this about? I've accepted that A just can't deal with homework for whatever reason, but I sort of thought it was one area where he was probably just digging in his heels. I had no idea it was such a common Asperger's trait. Can anyone explain what homework is so triggering what about homework is so triggering to these kids? I never liked it growing up, and it was cause stress, but the ASD reaction seems to go far beyond simply wishing you could watch TV instead. Thanks for any insights. Susanna, this is a really good question. There are a lot of reasons why ASD kids might find homework to be really awful. And one of the first ones is that they have spent so much time trying to contain themselves at school that when they get home, they need to de-stress and decompress. And if you try to jump them right into homework, oftentimes it's just they cannot cope with one more thing that they have to wrap up tight and do. So a little time in between is often good. Place to smell some vanilla, get low stim environment to be able to calm, restore a little bit of your vagal function and frontal lobe, get a snack. Low blood sugar is often one of the reasons. And the other thing, I know that Danny often says that he just didn't understand until even fairly recently why you do homework. The reasoning behind homework is often unclear to ASD kids because it is the same work you just did at school. And it's oftentimes very similar problems. It's just more repetition. And it's difficult to help a child understand that these patterns of working on something in a different environment help to instill the knowledge in your brain. It helps you go through the motions. Another thing is the painful handwriting. I know my son had a lot of problems with dysgraphia and homework. And when I started to scribe for him and he could type, that made a huge difference for him. Do you have...
I think that, a lot of the differences between someone with Asperger's coming home from a day of school and someone else is when you come home, your bucket's already full. It's overfilling, and you don't have much capacity to be able to handle the emotional things that are going on. You're already drained. And so, homework could be, it could be a lack of consent issue, like they don't want to do it and they don't see the point of it. It could be that it hurts their hands or any number of reasons. And by that point in the day, it just may be too much, and the process of defense mode happens because they're just overfull and overwhelmed. So a lot of the times, it's not that they don't want to do the homework. It's by the time in the day in which they need to do the homework, they're just over capacity.
I think that what is going on with your child's body is probably a huge part of the overwhelm. He is probably experiencing a lot of physical stress. And I also think that it sounds like you're experiencing a lot of stress. And I think it could be useful to you to pay attention to the fact that that's a physical experience and to just feel your body, feel your feet on the floor, and let yourself have an experience of your anxiety. Once you get it in that way, your ability to decompress yourself increases.
Which is going to raise your resiliency in working with your son and having more patience. And your son's going to see this and see that as it's a safer place to be. He's allowed to be himself. And that's going to build a lot of trust and confidence with you and your relationship with him. And that's going to help him bring his executive functioning back online once it starts shutting down.
We have some really good suggestions here. So my son sees right through endless homework for what it is, busy work. And honestly, endless homework is busy work.
It is.
We have a King Frank. Yes, we have our birthday boy here. Frank's birthday is today.
My kids this morning, they made me this amazing breakfast. And as you guys know, if you've seen me before, I wear my hat. And so they made me, my crown for my hat and asked me to wear and proudly display my birthday today. And
today on Asperger Answers specifically.
So, specifically here, so I felt obliged to do something nice for my kids who are doing something nice for me. So
some people have some other things that are kind of pattern ups, but I wanted to mention, Caroline, what you were describing sounds an awful lot like being with it, which is one of the things that we talk about. I think we've got an article and a product about being with that on our website. So you can find out more about that on our website, aspergerexperts.com. And somebody says, I am legit in tears, Christina. Went through this with my 8-year-old, so I'm homeschooling, but the work has traumatized him, and it has taken so long to get him accustomed to doing work again. He has, I'm going to pin this because y'all are really busy on this. Many sensory regulations, and we're working on a visual board. Therapies have helped tremendously. It's slow and grueling, but totally worth it as he's coming around. It is totally worth it, and kudos to you for doing such a good job by your kid. It is tough to reject sometimes the mainstream of what we're supposed to do and take on our own path, and you're really getting your kids back there. And it does take a while to get them out of that stress, I think, of the rigid, you have to get this done. So you're doing your own path, and good for you. My son tells me he's doing great. Then I see his grades, not so much. Why do they tend to lie about schoolwork?
I'm the first person to assume good faith. It's not a lie. We actually, when you're in and doing your schoolwork, you're actually trying to do your best. And that may not you are doing your best. I believe that your son is doing their best. It's not necessarily fair to place that against other kids in the class or other grades or anything else. Every kid is at their point, and the idea is, to help them grow from where they're at to another thing. At least that's my perspective. It's when you're in shutdown, you don't remember all the things that you're supposed to do when you get home. So you don't know or remember which math assignment you had. It's just kind of a fog and a blurry, oh yeah, I did math today. Okay, cool. I may have homework, but I don't remember what it was. I don't even remember what exactly the math problems we were studying. It's not intentional. It is when you don't have when you're filled up, you don't have the mental capacity to store all that information in your executive functioning, and it goes away. So some techniques to be able to help is, take notes, record your notes, do the homework, follow up with the teacher, to find out what that is, be able to log into their website. There's many different ways to be able to get that information from your teacher and from the school on what is there. I think that it's not necessarily tend to lie. It's that you're overwhelmed, and it's just not there to process that this is something you need to do.
When I was a teenager and I was seeing a therapist for some depression, and I would tell the therapist I was fine. And my parents, later on, I found out my parents were so frustrated because I wouldn't talk about the things that were coming up. And I was like, well, why didn't you ask me why? They just assumed that I didn't want to talk about them. But the fact is that it was so glorious to have a safe hour with an adult and one-on-one time that I didn't want to ruin it by talking about all the bad things. I just needed to sit there and decompress. It was such a valuable time to me. And that was worth something. That was therapeutic. It wasn't the therapeutic that they expected, but it was therapeutic for me. And it wasn't a lie that I was fine. In that moment, I was fine. Wasn't fine any of the other times. I know I was supposed to talk about that. And if somebody could have held my hand a little bit, that might have been helpful. But it's not a lie. It's where he is. Homework is fine because he doesn't have to think about it, right? His grades are fine because they're behind him, and he can't process it right now. And if they're not fine, he probably doesn't want to process it right now. It's too overwhelming, right, to face that. So he's going to tell you whatever he can cope with. So is it a lie? Yes, technically, because it's not the truth. But it is not a lie in terms of intention, right? He doesn't mean to actively mislead you. My sincere belief is that our kids are just trying to cope with their lot, and that's what they've got.
I think that's true. And I also think that there is some value in mentioning and talking about the body, and
Yes.
you wouldn't maybe just dive in with it, but you could, rather than, one possibility is to ask your child what they feel in their body. It depends on your kid and your relationship, but you can say, I bet your body feels really tense right now. And when including the body becomes part of the conversation in your family, then your child can learn to use that as a tool and recognize, this is happening in my body and it's telling me this is too much. And it's grounding. It also makes it possible to, over time, be able to say, okay, I can tell my body has calmed down now and I can do my homework.
Mm-hmm. One of the places that we do talk about that some is foundations of communication,
Mm-hmm.
right? And one of the things that we talk about in that product is creating a shared language in your family. And that is creating an actual lexicon of words and links of what they mean so that everybody is using the same words and is on the same page about what they mean. So when you're talking about the body awareness, or when you're talking about responsibilities, or you're talking about being able to check in on how you feel, it's good to establish those common languages right up. And that way you're less likely to go into defense mode because things don't surprise you as quickly. So, let's see, somebody says he may actually know the stuff or thinks he does, but hasn't completed the assignments. Again, doesn't make the connection between knowing and showing or doing. And that is a good point, that the teachers don't know what's in your kid's brain. That he may know the material and not care if his grades are good. It's a trade-off maybe. And that too, your child has maybe decided to sacrifice their grades because they already know the material and they can't be bothered, which is real. And some kids do make that choice, but I think it's important that they understand the consequences of that choice.
And I think there's also a lot of complexities here. When you're in defense mode, you don't get good grades. And so that reinforces the fact that you're not a very good student or you're not very smart, when in reality, you're incredibly intelligent. Again, it's that self-awareness and perspective. It's not something, at least for me, I've been able to grasp fully. Like, there's still, it's kind of hard to explain, but it's...
Oh, I'm sorry, I took the comment away.
Yeah, that's okay. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's kind of like you're sitting on the outside looking in all the time. Mm-hmm. You're never actually fully engaged in the flow of the situation, but you're more of an observer. And that's kind of how we feel a lot of the time, I think, at least how I have felt all the time, a lot of the time. And so coming in here and so you're just always off kilter, and understanding what homework is, why homework is important, or the social dynamics at school. It's everything's just a little bit out of sync, and a little bit tunnel visions at times, and even more tunnel visions at times, and you have a heightened sense of emotionalness going on, which is it's there, and these things. it doesn't take a lot to be able to overfill the bucket when you're in here. And, when we talk about defense mode, defense mode is very much a biological process that all mammals go through when they experience trauma. And it's how we process trauma. And if we, for whatever reason, can't allow ourselves to go through the trauma, and some of that is actually, again, defense mode actually inhibits us from going through the trauma response. So,
allowing it to process through the cycle.
Because everything has a cycle.
Sure.
So, there's a lot of complexities around this, and the best thing is encouraging, letting your kids know that just because they don't get good grades, it really doesn't have a reflection upon their intelligence or how smart they are, or what they're going to be capable of or do in life. It does matter from the context of going into college, but again, those pieces are what the society places the importance on, and not what the individual does.
That's true. That's true, and values are another thing to examine when you're looking at that, and an interesting discussion maybe to have with your kids. We're going to take one more comment on this, and then we're going to go to a commercial. Jessica writes, my 13 son had a hard time in school with bad issues. I'm very sorry. We went to homeschooling for the past 3 years, but now he's wanting to get back into school. We enrolled him in a much better school around our home that deals with kids like him. How can I get him ready mentally and emotionally? Because we always had homework problems to get him to do it. Any help or me for the new IEP school? Yes, I have a few suggestions. At 13, there's a lot of transition going on. You're looking at that middle school age. And so having some clear thoughts about social boundaries and touching is first good to explore, because you've got a lot of kids. There could be a lot of bustle in the halls, making sure that your kid knows where it's okay to touch physically and not, both for your kid to be able to interact with other people and for other people interacting with your kid. Another one is to take pictures of your child at the school so your kid can look at them. It doesn't say when you're starting, if you're starting in the fall or if you're starting now, but if you have pictures of your kids meeting their teacher at the door of the school, especially at transition points, that can allow your kid to kind of get visual and form an image and think through how that's going to feel before they get there. Otherwise, you can just talk about it. And if your kid is a multimodal learner, visual or kinesthetic or auditory, you need to capture some of those pieces so you can present the information to your child. Having those pictures to look through and plan how things are going to be, having a plan is going to be the greatest thing you can do. And as far as homework, I would say our responsibility agreement is a really good thing to help a kid plan through what they're agreeing to, what you're agreeing to, and what happens when you're able to complete your task and what happens when you don't. And that might be also involving taking a picture of your kid at the table, being calm, doing homework, and saying, look, it's possible, right? Let's get an image of this and kind of process it in our minds. I think also some somatic grounding might be good to practice having your child be grounded in their body.
To help your child learn to pay attention to what their feet feel like on the floor, just that is huge. It's huge for the parent and for the child to feel your connection to the ground. I also think that to be prepared emotionally includes being aware of your body. So talking about the feelings that you have in your body, what your feelings feel like, will help your child transition to be able to think about that for themselves.
Okay, well, we are going to go to a commercial here in a minute. We are going to get to self-care and some motivation issues, and we'll be right back after this brief break. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rob Rady, and I am Danny's father.
I'm Ellen Rady, and I'm Danny's mom from Asperger Experts.
When Danny was growing up, it was challenging for the rest of us in the family because he didn't like to go places new, and he didn't like to try any new food.
We didn't have much information. I was able to get maybe a couple of books, and mainly with the definitions of what is Asperger's and the characteristics of Asperger's. But there weren't a lot of solutions. And I'm a solution-oriented person. I wanted a plan. I wanted things to do, ideas to make it better.
So it was a challenge to try to keep him moving in the right direction and try to keep the family sort of still operating the way we wanted it to operate.
And I didn't understand what was really going on, and that other parents and other children with Asperger's have experienced this same thing.
Today, Danny is a much different person.
You have no idea how exciting it is when Danny picks up the phone and says, "Mom, I have something really important to tell you." And of course, I'm like, "Oh my God, what happened?" And he says, "Mom, are you sitting down?" I'm sitting down. Guess what? I just ate a sandwich with really good ciabatta bread, mozzarella cheese, olive oil, and this green thing called spinach. And it was delicious. It's like watching a kid experiencing life for the first time.
He's obviously a very successful person and business person and is out in the world just thriving, and we couldn't be more pleased about that.
Hi there, and welcome back to Asperger Answers. I'm Heather with Frank and Caroline, and we're here today diving into some questions from our AE Plus group that we go into a little more in depth every week. And we got a quick question. Do you believe that nonverbal learning disability is similar to Asperger's? And I think that we actually get this question quite a bit, and it's kind of all on the spectrum. It's got a lot of similar stuff to it. Nonverbal learning disability definitely has some specific things that contribute to overwhelm and shutdown. So they are kind of similar, is my understanding. Is that what you understand?
From someone who has an auditory processing thing from when I was a little kid, yes.
Yes.
They are very much the same.
Do you know?
This is not my arena.
You don't? Okay. I didn't know if you knew.
In my case, I was mostly deaf until I was 3, and so I got tubes in my ear. And so what that did is up until age 3, I was walking around with, like this all the time and not really being able to hear much.
That's auditory
And then
processing,
and then when they were released, it was a massive amount of information overload, and definitely contributes.
And NVLD has some other aspects that are specific to it, but it's kind of our understanding that they're all kind of on that spectrum. People approach me when they find out where I work and they say, "Do you think I could be on the spectrum?" And I'm like, "Well, do you have senses?" And they go, "Well, yeah." And I'm like, "Then you're probably somewhere on the spectrum, right? Because everybody is. If you have them, then probably. Are you in the problematic part of it? Who knows? Do you have problems? Okay." So there's a huge need for older people. People are talking, I think somebody had asked if they were 42 and was it worth it to get a diagnosis. I was diagnosed this year and I'm 45 and I definitely found it worth it. It was validating not only in my everyday life but in my reprocessing and thinking about growing up and the kind of person that I choose to be. But I found it to have inherent personal value. There's not a lot of value for me in other services as I'm older. I think that right now the main emphasis on diagnosis is for IEP and 504 plans and school. So usually under school age is where people go for that. But there's a huge personal validation.
And personally for me, I kind of discovered this about a little over a year ago. I have not been formally diagnosed by a professional yet. Mm-hmm. That will be happening. I've had all my kids tested. For me personally, it made a whole bunch. It put a lot of pieces in my own personal story and puzzle together in a way that makes a whole lot of sense to me. And as I was like, "Oh, Asperger's," and I believe that my first response is, "Oh, that explains a lot."
Yep.
And it does, for me personally. And so that understanding of, hey, I'm not necessarily that completely weird guy. There are other weird people like me out there. There's other people who think like I do and process like I do. And I realize that I do that a bit differently than other people, which is a real strength because, you get to see the world from a little bit different perspective. And there's value in that. Mm-hmm. But so for me personally, yeah, it was a huge amount of value and a huge amount of, internal reconciliation.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So to jump into our next question, Kim writes for advice. I guess I'm asking for people to feel free to repeat themselves, as clearly I need to hear it again. That's the story of my life. I'm feeling like I'm losing my patience, which I'm guilty of doing. That doesn't mean I yell or get mean, but I do project whatever then, do what you want, which is not very mature and probably passive-aggressive, as I don't want the kids to do whatever they want. Excuse me, it's all the same stuff. Not bathing, not moving, not eating anything healthy or a color other than white or tan. Dry, brown, and crunchy is a rule, isn't it? I feel like I'm trudging up a hill with my family on a sled behind me, cracking the whip. We never do anything fun, and that's on you. Why don't we have more money? This is boring. I'm not eating this slop. Then I read Danny's post from earlier today, and I felt guilty. Because I don't get... Then I read Danny's post from earlier today, and I felt guilty because I don't get it. I just don't seem to be able to cross that bridge. I need to take care of myself. That much is clear. I do therapy, but the girl takes every last minute of my day. Do I just let her fail? Really? Is that letting go? If she doesn't bathe for a month, if she gains weight and her scalp bleeds, do I leave her home on screen so I can go get fresh air and breathe? Just let her sink in deeper while I feel selfish but laugh with friends at the beach? I guess today was a bummer, but I need to talk it out. First off, it's real. It's real. And it's not the typical neurotypical parenting situation, so it's often tough to get a lot of people to look at you and go, it's real. But it's real, and we're sorry you're having a tough time. And we understand that it's a tough time. You don't say how old your girl is, but just I would suggest from what you're saying that a lot of what you're writing about is how to support you. And Caroline, do you have some thoughts about that?
I think that one thing that you can do, and this is repeating myself, but I think one thing you can do is pay attention to what's happening in your body, because it sounds like you're doing things that you regret. Mm-hmm. That your outbursts, the way you're speaking to your daughter, that afterwards you feel badly about it. And if you can learn to recognize the feeling, the bad feeling that you feel when you're in an outburst like that, and just notice it and even name it. There it is. There's that outburst. You might not be able to change it in the moment when you know it, but if you practice over time, you will be able to recognize when it's coming. So that at first, in fact, it may be only in retrospect, you may look back and go, oh shoot, I did it again. And then it gets closer and closer. And when you're in it, but knowing you're in it is probably the hardest part, because you can't do anything about it at first. But you will learn to recognize there's actually a sensation in your body that takes place that is the beginning of that. And when you can recognize that, then you have many more choices. You can choose. You can say to yourself, you know what? If I keep on like this, I'm going to do something and I'll regret it. And you're setting yourself up to feel awful. And what you need is to find ways to set yourself up to feel good. And one way you can do that is to pay attention to your body in the way I'm talking about and really notice it. And this takes practice. But once you're able to do that, you will be able to, you kind of step back and you can see what your concerns about your daughter are with a lot more clarity and with a lot less emotional hook.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to say is, I've experienced this myself, and I find, and this is actually one of the areas that I find that when my resiliency is low, that I get into this state. Mm-hmm. And this is actually a form of defense mode for myself.
It is.
In that, it's, I'm overwhelmed. I don't have the ability to process everything that's coming in, and so I get into the whatever, just I give up, and just because that's all I have. Mm-hmm. I find that when I do take care of myself and analyze, am I hungry right now? Am I tired? What's going on with myself? Am I emotionally unstable? Did I just all these things? And once I check in with myself and just kind of say, okay, here's where I'm at. Sometimes that means that I hold off having that conversation with my kids for 10 or 15 minutes while I go back and take care of myself, do a quick meditation, listen to some music, change my environment around me, and take off my shoes, get centered. There's a bunch of different techniques, and these techniques are your techniques. They'll work. You need to try them and see what works best for you. It is different for every person, I believe. And, as you're starting to do this, your resiliency, your bucket will get fuller, it'll get bigger, and you're going to be able to handle more things. And when those things that are coming in that are overfilling you, you're just going to have some more room and capacity for those things, and you're not going to get to that point as quickly.
So, and you ask some pretty specific questions here. Do I just let her fail? Is that letting go, even if she doesn't bathe for a month? To a measured degree, yes. You let her fail. You let her see what it's like to fail. And there are limits to that, but it kind of depends on what you're doing. Do you let her sit while you go and enjoy the sunshine? If that's what you need to do to take care of yourself, yes, that's exactly what you do. And if she gets mad that you went without her, and say, you are totally welcome to come next time. You just have to be ready and go with me. But one of the things is that when they say, we never do anything fun and that's on you, you have to set a boundary there and go, I don't think so. I think that we are all making choices here that contribute to this dynamic. Again, there's a responsibility agreement that can help to clarify a lot of the things you're expecting of your family. But there are times when it does feel like you're the only one doing. And when your kids are in defense mode, or we like to assume here at Asperger Experts, we like to assume good faith. We like to assume that it is usually a problem of capability and not of motivation. So when we're looking at what gets in the way, if your children are only wanting to eat things that are white or tan, perhaps then if they're old enough, preparing their own food would be on them. I have a rule that if my son wants something other than what I made for myself, I'm not making a second meal until I get to sit down and eat. He still gets what he needs. So do I. Because, I can only make so many meals at once, and I can only make so many meals in a night. And I'm willing to make that second one for him, but I'm not going to stop everything to do it. So there may be some ways that you can accommodate your children and allow them to take some of the ownership of what you're looking to do right now. And that might help them understand what it is they're asking of you. Another thing that I say to the kids is, if you're asking this of me now, you're using up energy that I have stored for the last of the day. If you want to use up that energy, I can be a total meanie if you want. I don't mind. But we're choosing this, right? I'm choosing to give you energy now, and I won't have it later. So if you want to make that choice, I don't mind being terrible later. I can own that, right? I'm going to be out of energy. I don't mind warning them. It's okay to be real.
And presenting choices, right? And, here's, we can do X, we can do Y, we can do Z, and it's when you're in the moment and you're being overwhelmed, it's hard to get out of that space.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to just go, no, just to shove it off so that we get that feeling that's internal to us calms down.
Yeah.
And that's, unintended consequences. Yeah.
And feeling overwhelmed is physical.
It is.
It's a physical experience. And the more you tie your experience to your body, the more you have something tangible to work with.
That's right.
It's not just,
Right. In defense mode, they find that because of the biological fight, flight, or freeze response, the frontal lobes actually don't get as much blood because the body is shunting the blood to the places that might need to fight. So you actually cannot reason when you're in defense mode. So if your children are overwhelmed, you talk about if she doesn't bathe for a month. Sometimes, as we said earlier, if you're not in that situation, you're not thinking about the unpleasant thing and you don't want to talk about it or think about it. If there's something in the shower that smells awful, if there's something in it, like there's nothing, the washcloth doesn't feel right on the skin. If there is something like that that's getting in your child's way, they may not be able to articulate it until you walk through the process with them. But usually there's a root cause. Usually there's something that's getting in the way. Your kid, really wants to do it probably, and would like to be successful in these things. Most kids don't get up in the morning and think, I want to thwart everything, although it seems like they do. So assume some good faith and say, if we walk through this, maybe we can find the problem. And if you don't want to walk through it with me, I can offer you two choices and you can make your choice and I'm going to go on. And that is perfectly acceptable. So somebody had, what can I do to help my son be in the same room as family when we have milk, cheese, or certain items he says he feels sick around but used to have when he was little? Will therapy help? I don't know. Do you want to go to therapy? Because your son has identified that milk products are not okay. If your son is really feeling like milk products are the problem, if your son didn't want to be in the same room with a cockroach, would you make him? I understand that it's difficult, but do you want to send the message to your son that it is more important to appear good, or is it more important to actually be grounded? And so if you can excuse your son while the cheese is out, that's fine. If your son doesn't actually have a problem with cheese, but is saying that he does, then perhaps he needs a little control over the situation. And is that really honestly a bad thing to give him? It may be inconvenient for everybody else, but perhaps there could be parts of the meal without cheese, and then when the cheese comes out, your son can leave. If there is a way you can accommodate him in that, can you be as accommodating to him as you would to the rest of the family, I guess, would be my question. Anybody else got anything else to add?
Well,
to
I
that?
think that when you suggest that there's something wrong with what his response to the food is,
Right.
that you're teaching him to not trust his own senses.
Right.
And his senses can only tell him the truth. The truth is, for him, it's too much. And I agree, just like with the bathing thing, you may want to find out what is it? Is it the smell? Is it just what it looks like? Is it, whatever? That could be very helpful.
That could be more information.
And digging in and asking these questions actually builds trust with your kids, because you're demonstrating that you're listening to what they actually have to say and what they perceive their needs are. And this is where, well, you may not perceive that as their need. They perceive it as their need, and thus it is their need, right? It's and so if you're able to address their need and talk through them with that, that's going to build some trust around your guys' relationship and what you're and walking through that process, because you're helping them identify what's going on inside themselves. Them knowing going on what's inside themselves builds internal trust, that they can trust themselves, and you're showing that you trust them, which is going to allow them a little bit more space and a little bit more room, and their buckets can be a little bit less full. And you're going to find that over time that your relationship and how they react and how you react is going to change significantly.
Can I make a point here? Something very important to keep in mind when you're talking about these sorts of issues is to be careful of how you say something, because people will forget what you said, but they never forget how you make them feel. So be very careful that you're not coming up to your child and confronting them and going, well, what is it about the cheese that you don't like, right? Because that makes it sound like you're just going to shoot down everything they say.
Right.
And, okay, I'll find a cheese that you do like, right? You really do have to approach this with some modicum of respect. Like, please, I'm inviting you to tell me. I want to know what it is about the cheese. I'm not going to force you, but just if I could help explore this with you, that would really be awesome. And it may be a little while before you can build that trust, but keep trying in a non-confrontational manner. We know when you're trying to accumulate information to use in arguments against us, we know, just like you know, when you've got the lawyer kid who wants to shoot everything, we know. So don't do that. So, all right, we've got one in Canberra, Australia. Do you have any wonderful advice on how do I manage hormones and Aspergers? My son is prepubescent, and I'm wondering what's the most difficult hormone surge for him. How am I best to support him through his body change? You all have been our wonderful guidance so far. Love from Canberra, Australia. Love back at you. I don't have a lot of information for you on this except to be real and to give your son an outlet, maybe a journal. Or, blogs can be a little bit sensitive since they're online, but some way to capture and record how he's feeling. I think journaling is one of the best things as you're going through a journey. And I think that which hormone is less important than the fact that they're coming. And to be able to keep a log and kind of record his journey. It's going to be some ups and downs. There's going to be some issues with sleep. There's going to be some issues with brain development. And, just to keep making the next right choice and the next best decision.
Hormones are a big thing. We don't necessarily know what's going on in our bodies. Even the schools and what they're telling us is going on with our bodies makes us feel like what's going on with our bodies is weird. At least that was my case for like 7th grade health. Mm-hmm. The biggest thing is, having conversations about the changes and what it feels like, and that provide some reassurances that it's not going to always feel this way.
Yeah.
Right? Because, the feelings come big, we get through things. If he's having a hard time directing his energy or, his default mode when he goes into defense mode, it's flight, fight, or freeze. If he has a lot of aggression, directing that into martial arts or some other soccer or physical activity or some way to help him get the actual physical release is going to help him process the surgeon hormones. It's going to allow him to flow through those things a bit better, and they're not going to get so bottled up inside and kind of like have a build-up overload of the hormones. If you think about our systems and big hormone release, if we don't have the capacity to get that out through sweat and exercise and these things, then it just kind of stores up inside of us. It's just what happens, and then that's a contributing factor. So I don't have all the information I need, but I'd say that taking an interest in your son and his activities and what he's interested in, providing opportunities for him to grow and to explore what's interesting to him, and being there as a steady person who's consistent is going to provide the best support that he can have. If something happens and it comes up and he feels safe enough to come and talk with you about it, no matter what the situation is it most likely you're going to be able to work through a solution with him. If he doesn't trust you and he doesn't have a good relationship, then he's going to look for external sources to find that validation or find that, and he's not going to have he's going to just have a more difficult time. So,
and if it can't be you and you're not comfortable, identify a safe person in your life.
I have a big extended tribe. My kids have a whole bunch of different people that they can go to for different things, and I'm okay with that. I don't need to know what's going on, everything with my kid, and I know that if it's important, it's going to come back around to me. But I allow my kids to have space safe with other adults and other people to be able to express the frustrations that they may have about me. I think it's really healthy for them. So, I try to have those, we kind of all have those individuals who like our kids or that, and of course you want to be safe, but those external guidance is really useful for them.
I think it's also really important for you to talk to him in advance so that you provide some transition for him. Maybe it's already started and that's why you've asked the question. But to talk to him about the changes that will happen and what they might be like, so that when something happens, you can say, I wonder if that's what that hormone thing we talked about.
Right.
Or you can tie it to something so he's not blindsided by it. Being prepared can make a huge difference in his ability to manage.
And as well as from a neurological perspective, in my background, I've done a lot of disaster stuff. And one of the things that I found is that if you're able to walk yourself through how you're going to get out of a situation before you go into it.
You mean to mentally picture it?
Mentally picture or walk through it. So the example I use is when I get on an airplane, I count the number of rows to the exit seat. I close my eyes and I visualize myself counting and walking out the door. And it kind of seems kind of crazy. What the data shows is that I have an 80% more likelihood of getting off that airplane and getting the people around me off the airplane than if I didn't go through that exercise. And the reason is that when you go into flight, fight, or freeze, you don't have the capacity to think through things. And so the closer amount of time that you actually walk through visualizing something, those neural pathways are actually opened up and still there. And so to get a thought through that neural pathway is much easier if you've already exercised that thing, because you're just like, this is what I need to do. And then you're able, it's kind of primed and ready to be able to take that action.
It's a form of practice.
It is.
It is. It's a form of practice.
And it's so being able to walk through that with him allows him to, one, understand that, and two, your body, when you go through an experience, even if it's not the actual experience, but you're imagining going through the experience, your body actually goes through that experience. Not necessarily to the same degree, but you're still opening up and firing off the neural network and that. It's kind of fascinating. So.
It's very fascinating. There's also some age-appropriate books like It's So Amazing that are available on Amazon. I'm going to get one more comment, and then we're going to go into our third question because we're kind of running low on time. Thanks for being interesting. How do you get through to your child that you hear them and are listening, but that what they're saying is not fact and or rude/disrespectful? Now, I'm kind of a grammar person, and the first thing I'm noticing is that the word but automatically contradicts what came before it. So the interesting thing about your question is, how do you get through to your child that you hear them and are listening, but that you're not? And that's kind of what I read in your question. So you want to tell them that you're hearing them, but you want them to hear you too. They're not going to hear you until they feel heard. So you, as the grown-up who has a more developed neurological system, has to step up and go, I hear you saying X, Y, and Z. Now in your mind you're going, you're wrong and you're rude. But hear them and maybe even politely reflect the rudeness back to them. So you are saying that I'm not worth my salt and that I don't know anything. Feel free to reflect it. That's how you do it. You can tell them what you're hearing. You don't have to weigh it with judgment. Be as neutral as possible. But basically what you're telling me is, how do I get my kid to feel heard when I don't want to hear them? That's how your question is worded, and it's kind of interesting. Okay. Any other? I want to go to the third question now, because this kind of opens up to you guys. Jamie writes, I've been thinking about this recently. For those who are parents, what is the biggest challenge you have parenting a child with autism? I know this can vary over time, but for me right now, it is trying to stay upbeat, positive, encouraged when the autism life is so stressful and overwhelming some days. And in regard to my son, it's his aggression and sensory issues. I really respect that. For me, my biggest challenge as a parent of a child with Asperger's and having Asperger's myself has been self-care and routine maintenance, maintaining my routine so that I can be on top of my game, and self-care so that I can model that for my son and so that I can be on top of my game to take care of my son and to teach him how to take care of himself. That is my biggest challenge. I don't know. Do you want to?
I this is probably going to go very well into what Caroline will probably have to say is the biggest thing is myself and understanding myself, and what's going on with me, because then that gives me the capacity to be there for my child and then hold the space for them to figure out what's going on with them. The biggest challenge is honoring my child and their path, because it's not my path to define for my child. It's my job to facilitate my child's path through the early part of it, and to give them the experiences and the tools necessary to be successful. So I think that, my biggest challenge is really about me and being present for my children and being there in the way that honors them.
Jennifer says, my son says, I hate you over and over again while I drive him to the bus stop. That's real. And he needs to say it. And he needs to say it again and again, apparently. And he needs you to hear it, and he needs you to be okay with being you, I think. Our kids need to be able to express those feelings to us and not have us take them personally. That makes us safer. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, I'm just thinking, I think it takes practice to be with messages that you may feel hurt by, and to recognize the sensation of that in your body can help you to recognize, oh, okay, I get it. What he just said, I'm responding to as if it's personal, and I think that it may not be, and to be able to distance yourself from taking it as if he was trying to, maybe he is trying to hurt you. I guess it depends. But to recognize that he's doing it because he needs to, then good parenting is to not get hooked by it. And so recognizing what's happening in your body can help you to unhook.
She says, I just say I love you back. That's probably what I'd say too. Yeah. What are good career fields for children to study in college? What they're interested in.
Anything that they're interested in.
Whatever they're interested in.
Yeah.
Education.
Whatever their passion is, whatever's an interest, and whatever their passion is, and encourage them to follow their passion. They're going to be successful, because that's what happens when you follow your passion.
Somebody says, the biggest challenge for me was giving up my dreams for my son. I respect that, and that resonates with me a little bit, because having my son changed my life course dramatically. That being said, I always say that if I wanted convenience, I would have gotten plastic fish. and not a child. I wanted a child, and I was prepared to give up some of those dreams because he was one of my dreams. So I get that. I really do. And it kind of is a force in your life, and all of a sudden everything changes. But
and this is hard.
It is hard.
This is not an easy journey by any means. I mean, it takes real effort. It takes real work on the part of ourselves and to be successful parents for the people around us, or facilitators. This is incredibly difficult work. This is not the normal path. And to all the parents out there that are on this journey, you guys are doing great. And if anyone's telling you that you're not, well, they clearly haven't walked the path. And we can only do the best that we can do, and keep up the good work.
Yep, keep it up. That's all for today. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another Asperger Answers. We're not going to be here next week. We've got some internal in-servicing to go through. But I wish you the best, and thank you so much for showing up. Have a great day.
And thank you, Caroline.
And thank you, Caroline, for being here.
Fun.
Really appreciate your
thanks.
presence. Thanks. All right. Thank you, Frank. Take care, y'all. Bye.